Parable of the horse, the carriage, and the driver. One of the many ways in which this work illustrates the position of mankind can be found in the parable of the horse, the carriage, and the driver. In this parable or correspondence, people in their ordinary state are compared with a horse, carriage, and driver as follows. According to the parable, we all could be the driver, who is supposed to be on the box, controlling the horse and carriage. But instead we're drinking at a public house, spending nearly all our money there. We are not on the box because we're drunk, and as a result the horse gets little or no food and water, so is in poor condition, the carriage is in a poor state, and in need of repair. The first thing that is necessary, of course, is that the driver should wake up from that slumber, and begin to consider the situation. Have you ever wondered what the public house might be, what the drink is, and what this drunkenness represents? Supposing that we awaken to a certain extent, then cast aside all of our pictures and illusions about ourselves for a moment, then instead begin to reflect upon our situation. We must depart the public house and thus begin to see the condition of our horse and carriage. The horse is starving, the carriage in very poor condition. We notice that the horse is not even properly harnessed to the carriage, and that there are no reins between the horse and the box, nothing to communicate between driver and horse. Taking only this part of the parable, the fact that there are no reins. Obviously it would be useless for a driver to get on the box unless reins were present. Perhaps we've realized by now that we have no reins between our intellectual center and emotional center. Our heart does what it must and our mind observes passively. In the parable, our horse represents the emotional center, and the driver represents our mind. There is no proper connection between thoughts and emotion. We may mentally think and resolve to behave in a certain way, not to lose our temper, not to grow distraught, but when the actual situation arises, we find that thoughts have no control over our feelings, there is no control of the horse. In the parable this means we have no reins between the driver and horse, assuming of course that the driver is actually on the box. We decide mentally that we will not allow ourselves to behave in a certain way and fail. However, what usually happens? We cannot control the horse. The horse behaves independently of whatever it is the mind has decided upon. We may, for example, decide to be very brave in the presence of danger. Then a car backfires and the driver is unable to control the horse. They begin to shake all over and so on. This is because there are no reins connecting the driver with the horse. The trouble is that the driver and horse speak different languages. The horse, that is our emotional center, does not understand the words of the driver, which represents intellectual center. Gurdjieff used to speak of the reins, and a way of connecting the driver with the horse. Consider for a moment what language the emotional center uses. It uses the language of visual imagery. Our emotional center does not know any intellectual words or theories, but it understands visual images. For example, if you are in danger and feel nervous, then you meet someone who is visibly quiet, it settles the horse, our emotional center. That calm demeanor is a visual cue which affects the horse, so calming the animal. From one side then, our emotional center is governed through the language of visual imagery. How can the driver then connect with emotional center? It is not enough to simply have thoughts, because our emotional center or horse does not understand those thoughts, which mostly take the form of words. Ordinary thinking takes the form of language, words, such as I will be brave or I will ignore what they say. We can begin here to see that those reins that connect the driver with the horse are interesting tools, and the reason why Gurdjieff often referred to them. Imagine you are up against some situation that can easily make you negative. You say to yourself, I will not be negative, or I will not react to this situation, and you may use many phrases like that in your mind. That's the driver verbalizing, and yet when the situation arises, the horse gets out of control. Driver he know, horse he not know. Horse he not understand. He not understand what driver says. That is to say, there are no reins passing from the driver to the horse. The driver does not know how to control the horse, so thinks it can be controlled through will and intention, by arranging various thoughts in a certain orderly manner. The horse, however, does not know this language. It does not receive the messages. In fact, the horse does not know the decisions of the driver at all. If the driver knows nothing about the horse and how to approach the horse, to convey willful intent, then that is exactly the position of a person on the box who has no reins to control their horse. How can the horse understand the language of a driver? Whether the driver speaks and thinks in English, French, German or Hindustani, the horse does not know any such verbal language and thought. We can all notice this, that there are no reins between our thoughts and our feelings. It's interesting to think about those reins that connect the driver and horse, how obvious it is through self-observation, that there is in reality no connection. How easily we accept some parable of the work, a teaching, yet never think deeply about what it really means. This work is finding greater depth in what has already been shared. However, people understand the work superficially, that we must observe our negative emotions, but what a long time it takes to practically do this. All development and all inner evolution depends upon seeing more deeply what we at present only observe on the surface, subjectively. People hear about that horse, carriage and driver, also learn that there are no reins between the driver and horse, but simply take that as a statement of fact. They might say, for example, "Why don't you know the parable of the horse, carriage and driver already? Didn't you realize there are no reins?" Great, but have you ever thought what that means? We are not talking about the waking of the driver in this commentary, but the driver who has awakened just a little and therefore no longer in the public house. We are speaking of those who have got a short way beyond sleep, vanity and pictures of themselves, people who have caught a glimpse of their false personality. People who have begun to see that they are not in the least like what they thought they were. What does this mean, that first stage of waking from a drunken stupor? After a time in this work it is possible to see the people who are more asleep than you, people who are more drunk, intoxicated by their own self-importance, their own negative states, imbued by the idea that they can do everything, enthralled by their self-images, roles, and diverse levels of maturity. This dialogue is not referencing such people, for it is obvious that as long as someone thinks there is nothing wrong with them, that they are going to take any work as something added to themselves, such as they are today, they will remain drunk in the public house, adorned in their new accessories. They will of course never imagine they are in a public house, inebriated. On the contrary, they will indulge in wonderful ideas of themselves, that they have will, they can do and manifest anything just by thinking positively, that they are efficient, they know best, motivated and have a real permanent I along with all the rest of it. Unless they have awakened from these profound illusions, and begun to feel their own helplessness, accepted their absolute nothingness, then they will never be able to climb up onto the box. We are speaking instead in this parable of people who have awakened just a little, and are actually trying to sit on the carriage, control the horse, and not simply lollygagging in the public house. Reflect for a moment on one meaning of the connecting reins between driver and horse. We should have journeyed far enough in this work by now to begin to know a little of the connection. It is no use obviously trying to define exactly what that connection might be. We all know the type of question. Will you tell me exactly what the reins are then? It is often said that we have to pay for great knowledge through long work. We realize this when meeting a person who understands that and does not ask, what exactly does self-remembering actually mean? What is self-observation? What is this work supposed to be all about then? Someone that is not oblivious and has begun to awaken from the drunken stupor of everyday life in the public house. That person is waking up from the terrible hypnotism that plays with us all. Here we have somebody who is emerging from the alehouse, perhaps not that steady on their feet, but nonetheless capable of looking at a horse and carriage. They may climb up to the box and fall off as we all do, and yet there is some understanding in them that this is what has to be done. If you have reached that point, then you are in this work. Of course we often return to the public house. Oftentimes get so far on the box and then fall off again, but we have already grasped the idea of what this work is about. Do not mind if you fall off the box a lot, so long as you have something more in you that knows you are off the box, and a real desire to get back on it again. It's here that we have to work against negative emotions of a certain kind. The reins are not made between driver and horse, or rather only wrong reins are fabricated mechanically. They are not made in the first and second states of consciousness. The first state is actual sleep, the second is a so-called waking state in which we conduct our daily affairs, go about our business, eat, walk, talk and imagine that we are doing something. To establish the right connection between intellectual center and emotional center, between driver and horse, we must be able, to however limited an extent, to remember ourselves and be in focused attention. In the zone of Zazen. Why do parables exist? Why is the teaching of the Gospels in the form of parables? It is visual imagery. The horse understands visual language, the driver's thoughts and the parable connect the two. Visual imagery is a universal language, it's objective and so can be understood by anyone regardless of age, tribe, culture, ethnicity, epoch or geographic location. It is the language of signs and the language of symbolism. The horse only understands such universal language that is comprised of visual imagery. This is why, if we wish to control the horse from mind, then we must visualize and not merely think. One of the things taught in this work is visualization. To visualize what we have thought of with regard to our learned behaviors toward any particular person. We must take that person into our visualization because to visualize a person is a form of external considering, in the deepest sense. We could add visualizing someone else as yourself, visualizing their individual troubles as if our own, and we were actually that person. This is the beginning of making reins between driver and horse, which really means visualizing the other person eventually. We cannot visualize a person in the right way if we are negative towards them. Our emotional center is clairvoyant when it's purged of negative emotions. We cannot visualize someone else if we are doing it from duty, or embarked upon some noble quest. We are advised not to attempt it. Visualization is a very quiet activity, a very non-active process and can't be pressured. As a rule we only get about a quarter of the way and then give up. You can only visualize another person rightly when you know something about yourself. We become human to one another when we truly know ourselves. An exercise is given to students of esoteric schools, where they are asked to visualize one another and to say to the person visualized, "What is your trouble?" If rightly done, it is said that the person will show you. The vision will share, so that their inner world is revealed to you. This is possible for everyone, but difficult. Because it's felt, rather than being heard. The purification of emotional center is one of the tasks of this work, where we have to handle one another far more gently, internally rather than externally, and it's therefore very intimate. Many afflictions, some illnesses, headaches, sudden loss of force and depression begin to happen to us at a certain stage of this work, if we treat one another wrongly. The work is a very pure thing, and depends upon inner sincerity. We should all understand what it means to have pure intent of heart. What is meant by purity? Purity is sincerity. When we try to visualize someone else, it should take time to do so, and is certainly not worth doing if you are impure in this regard. We must remind ourselves that the whole of the work comes in at this point. We can help one another, but not without the work behind us. Visualization is the connection between intellectual center and emotional center, and if we have the intention to behave rightly toward someone, then we must visualize ourselves behaving rightly, and not merely think or postulate around it. It's remarkable how a little pure visualization helps everyone, and how it helps us to work on ourselves. Simply thinking does not help enough, but is necessary. Mere talking is worse than anything, because by talking we are so often justifying ourselves. You know how often we all say, "Well, I am going to do my best to help them and I promise I won't say anything unpleasant." Then what happens next? Simply observe this in yourself and chances are that you have merely fed your imagination and your vanity, doing nothing to help the situation. We know when a cat rubs itself against your leg, it is caressing not you but itself. It sees things from the perspective of its personal space and not yours. Visualization is directed imagination, and not self-gratification.